I still think about this Fizzaroli moment. Because it cuts to the core of his character. He's undeniably become a symbol of hope for all of Imkind, but how did he reach those heights, and more importantly, what drives him to make Hell itself into a better place? Fizzaroli's journey to the top wasn't an easy one, to say the least. Ever since his youngest days, Fizz was clearly a natural-born performer. Even as a child, he outshined everyone else and became one of the top earners for the All-Imp circus that he used to work for. He never had a proper chance to enjoy his childhood, as his talents were continuously being exploited for the sake of others' profits. Fizz could only afford to be a kid whenever he was on break, in between his many shows. In one of these rare moments, we get to see that even back then, he'd do his absolute best to uplift and cheer up anyone in need. During a play pretend session with Blitz, he calmly reassures a legless horse that everything will be okay. It's a small gesture, but it highlights just how kind-hearted and accepting he was, despite his young age at the time. Thanks to his sheltered upbringing, Fizzy had an idealized vision of the world around him, and Blitz always made sure to keep him safe from the unsavory parts that came with his stardom. This allowed Fizz to dream bigger than anyone else. His ultimate aspiration was to share the spotlight with Hell's original clown, Mammon, aka the Sin of Greed. Nothing was going to stop him from accomplishing his destiny. Not even a devastating accident could slow him down from reaching that end goal. Fizzaroli never allowed himself to be broken by his unfortunate circumstances. He learned to embrace his newfound body and persevered regardless of the pain and sorrow that came from losing it all in the fire. For his entire life, he already had the experience of being sold as a main attraction, and on top of that, Fizz got used to the expectation that he's always meant to deliver, no matter what. This lifelong conditioning made him the perfect candidate for becoming the new face of Mammon's brand. And speaking of brands, this is where the Robo-Fizzies come into play. They're a recurring element from the Helliverse, to the point where even someone as pretentious as Valentino owns 2 of them, which highlights just how desirable they are in the eyes of all demons, whether big or small. These bots are meant to be the physical representation of Fizzaroli's ongoing objectification, as he's quite literally become nothing more than a money-making machine for his greedy boss. They also give a face to the general mistreatment that most entertainers have to endure, embodying just how normalized it's become for them to be sold off as soulless products for the enjoyment of the masses. Their existence creates a rather uncomfortable dilemma for Fizzaroli. Besides the fact that he doesn't agree with his likeness being used for such twisted purposes, these robots further reinforce the bias and discrimination that imps have to face on a daily basis. The idea that imps are disposable and should be considered property goes against everything that he's been trying to accomplish with his status as Hell's most famous performer. Even with that in mind, the overall exposure effect that came with the emergence of his public persona can still very much be seen as a double-edged sword. After all, it gave Fizz the chance to perform side by side with some of Hell's founding figures, and it was undeniably empowering for lower-class demons to see themselves represented through his success. And if there's one benefit that he did gain from the creation of the Fizzbots, it was him becoming business partners with Asmodeus, aka the Sin of Lust. They quickly found refuge in each other as they were both showmen who inherently understood the difficulties that came with always having to put on a persona, all for the sake of keeping their own pre-established brandings intact. The closer they got, the more they fell in love, and maintaining the facade that they totally weren't became increasingly unsustainable as time went on. Simply staying by Ozzy's side and supporting him with his daily endeavors made Fizz happier than ever before. Deep down, he was ready to move on to the next chapter of his life, but he was too afraid to accept that reality. Fizzaroli fully embraced his duties as a role model for everyone in Hell. If he left his fans behind, who would be there for them? The mere thought of Mammon being their only alternative terrified him, since he knows all too well what it's like to be disappointed by your biggest idol. To make matters worse, Fizz was slowly crumbling under the weight of the empire that was built around his public persona. He'd been on top of his game for close to 10 years already, but the impossibly high standards that were imposed upon him really started to leave their mark on his psyche. Asmodeus was genuinely worried that Fizzaroli would end up hurting himself as he pushed further and further into the limits of his deeply ingrained workaholic tendencies. Thankfully, things took a slight turn for the better after Blitz stepped back into Fizzy's life, getting clarity and closure on what really happened during the tragedy that tore them apart all those years ago made it possible for them to rekindle their long-lost friendship. Oz knew that having Blitz as an ally would be crucial in helping Fizz to finally move on from his long-standing trauma. Blitz's bluntness and protective tendencies were exactly what Fizzarali needed, as he'd constantly find himself in situations where he had no choice but to casually overlook and justify Mammon's abhorrent behavior towards everyone else. On the flip side, Blitz isn't the type to ever tolerate that kind of injustice, which ultimately reminded Fizz that, as a matter of fact, not only does he deserve better, but so do his fans. Regardless of that reality, he still felt deeply indebted towards his boss for giving him the opportunity to stand on the grand stage in the first place. This is why he's so hellbent on continuing his win streak for Mammon's yearly clown pageants. From his point of view, it's the bare minimum that he has to accomplish in order to prove that he's still worthy of standing by Mammon's side. Even if some of his peers completely disrespect him out of their jealousy for his long-term success, Fizz is a pro who feels obligated to wield his influence in a responsible manner, no matter what pettiness gets thrown his way. As long as he carries the weight that comes with the title of being Hell's greatest performer, he'll do his absolute best to lead by example through his courteous behavior. Plus, he knows how hard it is to actually reach that podium, so he genuinely respects anyone who manages to get that far in the game. And most importantly, Fizzarali isn't the type to casually look down on others, since he wouldn't ever want to be seen as lesser than by anyone else due to his own disabilities. Which further begs the question, why even stick around the King of Greed when he clearly sees imps and other Hellborns as nothing more than disposable trash? It's quite evident that Mammon's resentment extends to Fizz as well, considering how openly he talks down to him on the regular, effectively treating him like a dumb child at best. By far, the worst part about this is how he completely infantilizes Fizzarali's increasingly frazzled state of mind. Having an off day is totally out of the question, and somehow, what used to be the biggest source for Fizzy's strength has become just another easily exploitable weakness for his greedy master. The love he feels for his fans comes from a genuine place, but Mammon's money above all else mentality actively rewards and encourages bad apples to continuously step all over Fizzarali's boundaries. His batteries were already running dangerously low at that point, but things truly came crashing down when Fizz not only got cornered by a longtime stalker, but also by his boss and competitors. As his bodyguard and friend, Blitz did everything in his power to help, but he couldn't exactly save Fizzarali from the pitfalls of his own mind. The pressure that came with potentially losing everything all over again inevitably made Fizz spiral into a full-blown panic attack. Whenever faced with such trying times, his undying love for Asmodeus was the only thing that truly brought him inner peace anymore, as evidenced by the ever-present mementos with Ozzy's insignia that he always kept close to his heart. Clinging to those feelings is what gave him the strength to put his dissociative mask back on. But Oz had other plans in mind, as he was dead set on ending Fizzarali's self-destructive cycle once and for all, with a much-needed love intervention. The truth is, deep down, Fizz hoped that he could change Mammon's ways and ultimately be seen as his peer and equal. But in his heart of hearts, he knew that day would never come. No matter how miserable he felt on the inside, he still conformed and forced himself to smile, disregarding the constant torment that he was subjected to. The way Fizz sees it, being fine is just another one of his countless obligations towards Mammon. Whenever he's fine, it's actually the complete opposite and nothing more than a cry for help. This is why, even at his lowest points, he'll continuously say it again and again, because that's what's expected of him. Minimizing his concerns in front of Mammon became the norm, to the point where he falsely believed that he had to do the same thing for Asmodeus. More than anything else, Fizzarali just wants to be seen as a good boy. He'll do whatever it takes in order to avoid becoming a hindrance to the ones whom he admires the most. Ever since he was a kid, Fizz desperately wanted to feel loved and acknowledged by his superiors, which quite clearly stemmed from the lack of authentic parental figures in his life. Just like Mammon sees Fizz as the son that he never wanted, Fizzarali's younger self also naively thought that Mammon could eventually become the father figure that he never had. With that in mind, he molded himself into becoming the perfect doll for Mammon's poisonous brand. By doing so, Fizz inevitably swallowed up his boss's equally venomous lies that his only self-worth came from the persona that was manufactured around his name. Even before he met Mammon, Fizzarali questioned if he could ever be good enough for his idol, so he used perfectionism as a shield against those self-doubts. After the accident took place, he felt a desperate need to overcompensate in every department in order to prove that his disabilities didn't make him defective or any less valuable. His physical scars may have healed long ago, but his mental wounds still very much linger. Performing was the only constant that he had throughout his entire life, to the point where it became his ultimate survival and coping mechanism. Even then, your main emotional crutches can only fill that inner void for so long. Sooner or later, you have to address the root of the problem, and Fizz has clearly reached his breaking point. Everything about his job made him feel trapped, but he couldn't just let go, since it became his entire identity. He's been abandoned before at his most vulnerable state, so he's afraid of being thrown away like a banana peel the moment he's no longer deemed worthy of his position in the spotlight. Sacrificing himself in exchange for his status was a price that he was still very much willing to pay, despite everything that it entailed. Fizzaroli's imposter syndrome is so bad to the point where he genuinely believes that his own achievements were only possible due to Mammon taking pity on him all those years ago. Fizz saw winning as his one and only guaranteed way of never losing everything that he holds so dear. This led to him living his life in fear, 1 year at a time, with each new one potentially being his last. His low social standing as an imp, combined with how deeply insecure he felt about his scars, made Fizz feel hopelessly insignificant and completely unworthy of a king's admiration to begin with. Fortunately though, when Oz gently reaffirmed that he fell in love with the awe-inspiring man behind the persona, Fizzaroli finally realized what a true jester he'd been for not snapping out of it any sooner. Neither of them may be perfect, but that doesn't mean they can't be perfect for each other. Asmodeus witnessed firsthand just how much of a positive impact Fizzy had on Hell, and seeing him accomplish so many things in such a short time span really made Oz wonder what he'd been doing wrong for all those millennia. Both of them have their regrets about wasting time, but paying those dues gave them something much more precious than money could ever buy. At last, Fizz internalized the fact that he's already won the biggest possible jackpot by gaining Ozzy's eternal love. For the longest time, he thought performative trophies would somehow make him feel whole again, when, in reality, they were slowly tearing his soul apart. He's officially done with competitions and chasing after the mirage of perfectionism. But at the end of the day, Fizz is still a performer at heart, so he'll make sure to go out with one hell of a bang for his final victory lap. It only took him 2 minutes to let go of all of the emotional baggage that had been weighing him down for so many years. His empowerment anthem is the ultimate clapback against everything that Mammon's empire stands for, and Fizz makes it very loud and clear that he won't be anyone's toy or plaything anymore. For most of his life, the jester suit that he wore so proudly also served as the ideal armor against his biggest fears and insecurities. But in time, it became nothing more than a set of golden shackles that kept him trapped in the darkest depths of his soul. By willingly shedding that part of his identity, one piece at a time, Fizz finally allowed himself to truly break free from Mammon's oppressive grasp once and for all. With one last push from his greatest allies, he knew it was no longer his fight alone. And more importantly, a heartwarming interaction from earlier backstage reassured him that his efforts weren't in vain after all. Connecting with a deaf fan ultimately helped Fizz reconnect with his younger self. It gave him a much-needed reminder of the main reason why he chose this life in the first place and who he was doing it for. Above all else, he wanted to be there and give a voice to all the demons who felt unseen, unloved, and unwanted by Hell's unrelenting hierarchy and its suffocating set of values. Fizz became the living proof that no dream is too big for Lucifer's grandiose playground. After Fizzaroli's mic drop moment, Asmodeus also felt empowered to drop the act. They're both officially done with hiding themselves and denying their truths. In theory, Oz broke the ultimate taboo by declaring an imp as his equal, but so did Fizz by publicly defying and humiliating his former master for all of Hell to see. These acts of rebellion are just the starting point for the greater change that's beginning to overtake the fiery pits of Hell. One last thing that's worth mentioning is how Fizzaroli's mission to bring hope to demonkind also inspired Ozzy to upgrade his own duty as the Sin of Lust. Together, with their newfound mission of love, they're ready to showcase that as a matter of fact, sensuality and romance do go hand in hand after all. As Fizz gets ready to enter his honesty era, the torch of hope will inevitably pass on to other aspiring dreamers, and who knows, they may end up being more familiar than you'd think.